fixed that car here with a piece on handbrake cable replacement. So why do I want to replace these two sections of handbrake cable? And the reason is here. On this particular car, the cables pass through a guide which has become rusted. I've greased it up to free it, but just about there, if you can just see it, there's a piece of the cable come loose where it's broken. This is typical. If a handbrake cable goes rusty, it'll become stiff to operate. You can grease it or oil it to free it, but there's a fair chance it will fail subsequently. So if that's happened, it's well worth replacing the handbrake cable on your car. In this particular case, there are 5 sections. There are 2 small sections inside the hub, so I'm not going to replace those. And there's a small central section with an adjuster inside the car. I'm not going to replace that. I'm just replacing these 2 sections. You'll need good access underneath the car. In this case, I've driven the front of the car up on the ramps. I've got the rear of the car on axle stands with additional support, some wood here and some other pieces, bits and pieces around the other side. First thing to do is inside the car to gain access to the adjuster. Now in this car it's not too difficult, and just down there is a nut. Just by undoing that I can loosen off the cable. Other cars you may have to remove a bit of trim, but there will be an adjuster somewhere, usually inside the car. In older cars it can be underneath, but generally these days it's inside like this one. Underneath the car there's a sprung connector which you can see here. I'm going to do this off camera, but I'm going to push that grommet on the tail end of the cable up into the centre and release it by pulling it out. These rear clips are best removed by pushing a screwdriver down the back of the lug, then using a second screwdriver to lever the lug out. Just be careful, because if you overstrain this piece of spring steel, you won't be able to use it again, so you'll be buying even more parts to replace on the car. This is the old cable off the car with its equalizer. Taking a close look at why I'm replacing this. Now that the cable's out of the guide, you can see quite significant deterioration. That end wasn't far off breaking at all, and in fact the other end, where it went through the guide, was starting to fray away as well. So a job done just in time. Let's compare the old with the new. So here's the new shorter cable. That actually looks pretty good. And here's the new longer cable. Next thing to do is to swap over this equalizer. There's 2 rubber rings which I'll push down gently, which should allow me to disengage these ends and fit this to the new cable. This is the equalizer swapped over, greased up as well, it's a little bit rusty. I've also filled this cable with oil. If it had been nylon coated centre cable I wouldn't have done that, but I did that by removing that rubber grommet and just squirting an oil can down the centre of that cable, just for a bit of added corrosion protection. The guides are cleaned out and packed with grease. These are the critical component. To be fair, they are a service component. They're not on the service schedule, but really these points on the rear of these Vauxhall cars in particular should be greased as part of normal servicing to avoid this type of corrosion. Getting the replacement cable on the car should be simpler than taking the old one off. This lug is the first one I'm going to put in. That should just sort of slot in and pull back. Then I'll do the 2 rear ones, which should go on just by squeezing on with a pair of pliers. These clips did in fact go together very easily just by squeezing the grommet in with a pair of pliers. Finally, back to the adjuster on the handbrake, and this time we're tightening up, but we're going to go for about 3 to 4 clicks on the handbrake lever for the right adjustment, and just make sure the drums are rotating freely at that point. So that is how you replace a handbrake cable. should you need to remove these drums, and you'll need to remove them for all sorts of purposes, there's a centre aluminium cap here, which is generally damaged by garages and mechanics, and there's no need to do it. Most manuals will say, oh, use a screwdriver or chisel, but that's not the thing to do. Just get an old wallpaper scraper and grind a curve that matches the curve there. You can sharpen it, then use that to penetrate behind the aluminium cap. Use a screwdriver between the back of the wallpaper scraper and the drum, and you can easily remove that centre cap without doing any damage. There's the tip for today. Hope you've enjoyed watching. Please subscribe